Ghostbusters Afterlife spoilers. Egon is a ghost at the end. There's your spoilers. So, so let's talk about this. Like, might as well with spoilers start at the top of it. But hopefully, if you're watching the spoiler review, you've already watched the movie. This movie was awesome. I talked about it in the main review. This is going to be a little bit more of running through the plot as best I can, running through the story, talking about story beats that I couldn't. So, the opening of the movie, the literal beginning of this movie, actually starts out with the same creepy music and stuff like that from the original. Love it. All of the fan service in this movie, fuck those who say the fan service is bad. All of the fan service in this movie is warranted and great because a lot of it is in-world weirdness and part of the things that make sense. Stay Puft is still a thing in this universe. The marshmallow brand still exists, therefore we get little bitty Stay Puft Marshmallow Men later. Ghostbusters existed, they did a thing. Apparently the second movie got fucked out. Like, hey, we're not going to talk about what happened with the second movie at all. We're just going to talk about the events of the first one. Done and done. So, this movie starts out looking at a plateau with this crazy like fire tornado happening. And you see a single burst of a proton stream. And then you get a truck hauling ass back to the farm. How he went through the gates at the Shandor mine initially and then drove very quickly, smashing through them on the way out, I don't know. That's fine. Drives back to the dirt farm. And then, like, the person gets out of his truck, trying to get up to the porch. He gets onto his porch, and he flips this big old switch. And you see these weird silo thingies out to the side just light up in electricity. Clearly, this is Egon. We already know this is Egon's farm from the trailers and all this other stuff. You never see his face. You never see his face. You just know it's Egon. They kind of give you an outline. You can see that he's wearing glasses, more or less. I think he's got a trench coat on or something like that, more than likely. So he's standing on the porch. And like I said, he hit the switch. These silos like light up. And he stands on the porch with a ghost trap held out like this. It's smoking and the light's blinking. It's like, what the fuck did he catch? It's like he caught something. And then you hear this growling and the sound from the corn. Whose corn it is, I don't know, because apparently he only mines dirt, or he only farms dirt, so it's somebody's corn. You gotta have corn. You hear this growling, you hear this noise, and then from that point of view, you see something kind of coming at him, and he steps on what looks like a ghost trap pedal, and then things make a noise, and then, short out. And at this point, it's the holy shit moment. You're like, oh god. And that's literally what happened to him. So he runs inside, shuts the door, does all this other stuff. He lowers, like you see, he's got a hole in the floor. He sets the trap in that hole in the floor. And then he just sits down in this chair. And he pulls out a PKE meter. And you hear some stuff happen on the roof. And then, like through his, I think it was through his chimney, you see this smoke come down and it sort of takes a form. And it comes right up behind him. And you see the PKE meter kind of starts going off through the roof. And then it's just silent. And then through his chair, the arms come out. I was like, holy shit. I was like, it's Zuul. Or something like Zuul. And then what's really awesome, you see for just a split second, the PKE meter goes, like it flips all the way up and then turns into a taser. Like, what the fuck? It's like, could it always do that, or did he make some tweaks? So something that's very obvious throughout this movie, he has made some tweaks to their technology. Apparently he has no containment unit, though, which makes sense because, like, he's not exactly busting ghosts in the same way. I'm sure that he has at some point in secret, but like his proton pack, if you actually get to look at it up close, if you look at the toy that's coming out from HasLab, if you are a fan, you need to get that. If you look at his wand, his Neutrona wand's a little different. He's modified it a little bit. And it's very obvious that he clearly trapped something related to Gozer in here. And he drops the PKE meter. It happens to land under the chair that he was in. It just happened, just sitting right there. And then we cut to the rest of the movie. Like, this movie starts out with the violent death of Egon, except apparently they said it was just a heart attack. Died of fright in his shitty house. So, just talking through it, Egon in this movie is characterized as a lone dickhead who doesn't like anyone, doesn't talk to anyone, just stays on his own. And like I said, it's a spoiler review, so we'll just talk about it. Apparently, he went off the rails, started talking about the end of days, started talking about all this other stuff. When the other Ghostbusters wouldn't listen to him, mind you, their days were kind of running out. Ghosts were just disappearing, just done in New York. They were running out of money. He took his proton pack, I think he said however many, like enough fuel, like I guess fuel rods, the Ecto-1, their uniforms, and every trap that they had. God knows how many traps there was, you know. The funny thing is, nobody ever talks about the fact that they hand manufacture all of their shit. There's no, I make ghost trap parts. Egon and the other guys, probably mostly Egon, you know, given he's a physicist, clearly an engineer, they created all of their shit. They made it by hand for the most part from pre-existing stuff. And he took all their shit and left them. He even ran off with the Ecto-1. Like, what the fuck? Mind you, Ray owned the Ecto-1, technically speaking, as far as we know. And so they had to board up, you know, they sold the firehouse and everybody went their separate ways. Peter went back into the college and he started basically his emeritus professor for marketing, which 100% makes sense. Apparently, Winston went on to found this massive, very huge firm of some sort. Got into investing, real smart with his money. Basically, the exact opposite of everybody else. And then Ray just went back to doing occult shit. You know, basically, his Ray's occult books, which is coincidentally set up with the Ghostbusters phone number, which is a plot point of this movie. So, which is how we get the old guys back involved at all, which is pretty cool in my own right. Though I find interesting, so Janine is introduced early on once the daughter gets kicked out. Once the daughter and the kids get kicked out of their place because they haven't paid their rent, like I said before. And if you watch the regular review, you know I talked about she's really not a good person. She's definitely lazy, doesn't get a job, doesn't care, doesn't try very hard. She was hoping to just get a cash payout to pay her rent and just move the fuck on. She hates Egon because Egon, when he left the Ghostbusters, he left his family. That's the fucked up part. He left his family behind, which, by the way, we have no idea who his wife and mother of his, at least one child that we know of, is. It's not Janine. It is not Janine. I'm going to make that very clear. He did not hook up with Janine. The Egon and Janine kind of love affair thing was only sort of hinted at in the movies, but she just sort of had a thing for him, but then she ended up with Louis Tully for the most part, right? It was mostly in the cartoon and stuff like that, maybe even in the comics, I'm not sure, where he and Janine had a thing. But in the movies, no. That's just the thing. So he and Janine did not hook up. They did, well, they maybe at some point. But that's not who his wife was. He left his wife, he left his daughter, he left his friends, he left his job, and fucked off to Oklahoma. Now, mind you, it was because he was doing more research into the cult of Gozer, or into the cult of Shandor, whichever it was. Same difference, either or. And he determined that what was going on was the next coming of Gozer. So 1984, when everything happened, that was predicted. All these major events were predicted and laid out by the original followers of Gozer and the cult of Shandor. And so, like, throughout this time period, they were trying to make it happen. The whole building that Shandor created in New York, all of the selenium, I believe is what it was, beams that made up the building, which I love how that's called into this. Why would you use something that's an electrical conduit as your construction material? Because it came out of this mine in Oklahoma. So he mined the metal in Oklahoma to build that building in New York. So that was where he was trying to get it to happen. But one tiny plot point, if you run these two things together, he abandoned the building in a way. Shandor, that is. So Shandor is in this movie, which is crazy. Like, they actually have him in this movie. And I was like, and it's J.K. Simmons of all fucking people they put there. I was like, really? I was like, he must have just been a big Ghostbusters nerd to want to be in this movie in this regard. Because realistically, he's kind of in stasis somehow. I mean, he's been in stasis for like since the 70s, I think, at least. I forget, because it has his, almost like it's a coffin. It looks like a glass coffin, and there's many holes in the wall of this new temple for Gozer, where they clearly must have had more followers at some point that were all sort of there. And he's the last one. He's the last holdout, and he's not dead. He looks dead, but he's not dead. He's not even rotting or anything like that. He was literally waiting for Gozer to arrive, and seemingly he probably cast some sort of spell, something. Who knows exactly? We didn't explore that. So, one of the major plot points of this movie is the whole connection to Gozer and Shandor, and why Egon ended up there in the first place. So he discovered that there was a town founded by Shandor, and in this town they have mined all the metal to build that building in New York that was made to be a giant spiritual hub and conduit of energy to allow Gozer to come through there. But like I said, for some reason, Shandor said, that's not going to be my thingy. I'm going to stay here instead. Don't know why. That was sort of just kind of, they could have left that part out and it wouldn't have mattered, realistically. It's one of the few weird contrivances I didn't like about this movie. That was the only spot I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because he would have been in New York. He would have been there for the event in New York, because that's what he set up. Why would he not be there? Instead, he's in Oklahoma. Now, maybe he died during the construction, and they put his body into that particular thing so that he would wait there, but that still doesn't make sense, other than that particular temple was basically a hellmouth. So, where in New York, the building was a conduit to draw in spiritual energy or psychokinetic energy to open the door for Gozer to come in there, which is also probably why the Destroyer came there, whereas there was no Destroyer in this one. It was just Gozer as Gozer. Instead of coming through to destroy everything, coming through just to rule over everything. This was meant to be like a new temple mount in a way for Gozer. But why the one in New York was seemingly abandoned makes no sense to me. So, also, if you include the events of the video game where Shandor set up so much more, and I think Shandor was to a degree, was in the game. So the game can't be canon, even though it should be. It's a fantastic game. Follows the storyline. Even follows the storyline of the second one. Where, like I said, this movie says, fuck Ghostbusters 2. That didn't happen. Which is fine with me, because Bill Murray ruined that movie. Bill Murray almost ruins this movie. He's in it, and I'm still mad. Like, Bill Murray outside of Ghostbusters, great. Bill Murray in Ghostbusters, they should have killed his character. If they could have. You know, Egon had to die because Harold Ramis died. That sucks. So, Egon discovers this mine. He sets up his house, starts building on the technology. He creates one of the craziest things, actually several of the craziest things, that we see. So, earthquakes are happening on the regular in this town. Maybe every day. and it's happening at a faster and faster rate. Like it was occasionally, and then it started turning into almost a daily thing, if not a daily thing. That's why Paul Rudd is interested in this town. I don't know if he's from there. I don't think they cover that, but he is a seismologist. That's covered very greatly when he's talking to Phoebe. You know, he's a summer school teacher. She's bored with watching old crappy horror movies, so she goes in to see what he's doing. He's actually monitoring stuff like that. You know, an earthquake happens, and then they start talking about that. So why is it so? Like, she shows him that she's very intelligent, knows what the hell he's talking about. Where he's ever so slightly trying to talk down to her, and then he's like, "Okay then." And so the idea that these earthquakes are happening, they drop that. They're like, but the pattern doesn't follow either volcanic or tectonic quakes. Like the way that it actually is shaking doesn't follow either thing. It's shaking in a way that doesn't seem physically possible, and there's no reason for it to be shaking, even if it was fracking or anything like that, natural gas exploration, any of that. None of that happens in this town. Why is this happening? And why is this town the epicenter? It's because of that hellmouth I sort of talked about. So they mention at some point that the followers of Gozer, as they dug this mine, did those other things, the miners started jumping to their deaths into this pit. Seemingly there was no bottom to this pit. This pit leads directly into the... I don't remember if they really give it another name other than Underworld. So like the Netherworld. So where ghosts and evil spirits come from, it is a literal open hole to that. And so sacrifices and all these other things get made to open this thing up. This is where ghosts come from. In a way, it's very similar to how Transformers Prime did the Well of Allsparks. Call this the Well of Ghosts. And actually, it's really funny how that happens. The same, very similar thing. So, in a way, like what happened in Ghostbusters 2 with the pink slime, and you know everything that was going on with Vigo and all that kind of stuff, and whenever he starts summoning all these ghosts and all this crazy shit starts happening, that happens in this movie too. But to stop the coming of Gozer and to keep... So remember, all these ghosts, all these spirits kind of have to come together to channel the energy to summon Gozer. He sets up the most ingenious thing I think we've ever seen. So once again, these spirits and everything are trying to open this gate. They're trying to invade. What we find is that he sets up 4 proton packs set on a PKE meter that when the PKE reaches a certain point, it activates all 4 proton packs together to cross the streams and force what is literally a swelling of ghosts and evil energy, including the ghosts. That makes sense. It was a miner. One of the only humanoid ghosts we see is a miner. It was a mining town. They sacrificed themselves. It makes sense. That's who would come into there. So, like, as they come rising up from almost literal hell, and it directs down into it, forcing it all back down. Basically, how they didn't destroy Gozer in the first one. They kind of forced Gozer back into its dimension. That's what we really cover with this. Gozer is sort of immortal and gets pushed back into its dimension, even though it looks like they technically destroy it. Whatever. They destroy the temple and they destroy the gate in New York. So that's what happens there. What happens here is he didn't destroy the gate, but he was keeping it from opening. And since he's all alone, since he abandoned everyone else who didn't want to listen to him, he's now built 4 new proton packs, more or less. 5, technically speaking, because there's one in the Ecto-1. So he has his proton pack he keeps at the house. He's got one installed in the Ecto-1 for the gunner seat, which is awesome, by the way. And terrifying. Very terrifying. Because they put that little girl, they put Phoebe in that thing. Now, mind you, controlled circumstances, fine, and definite green screen. That's one of the few things where it's compositing and all that stuff really goes out the window, and you're just like, okay. You know, it doesn't look great, and it's very obvious that it's on a green screen, but you know what? Fuck it. It's an awesome scene. So having a PK or having a proton thing on the car, badass. Having this trap literal set up to push back the coming tide repeatedly, but it's happening more and more and more. So what happened at the beginning of the movie was the gate getting opened. And that's one small plot hole. There's one small plot hole there. So as we recall from the first movie, and that's where I said a lot of people will definitely call this episode 7, because we've retread so much of what happens in the first movie. They're dealing with the same kind of villains. A lot of the same things happen. It's a very different resolution. In fact, they try the same resolution. It doesn't work. So they have to do something new, which is awesome. How they do it, I'll get there in a second. So apparently, at some point, his defenses fail, at least to enough degree that the Zool and Vince Clortho managed to get out. So what he did, what was in that trap, as we discover in the movie, was Zool. No, I'm sorry, it was either Zool or Vince Clortho. Kind of hard to tell. So it's either the Gatekeeper or the Keymaster. Don't know which one. Because I don't think they cover which one it was. We just see what happens. So we see the ghost dog head come out of the trap, and then it goes flying off and fucks off everything. Now, assuming... Did I say ghost dog? Demon dog, terror dog, however you want to call it. Their crazy horned beast form. They show off one of the statues, which is the more humanoid version of said thing. They sort of dropped that earlier in the movie as well. So you're starting to think of maybe that was a different version, but maybe there was a point at which they were bipedal instead of quadrupedal. So maybe. So what happens there is he had trapped one of them. Here's the ingenious part. That nobody ever covered this. The reason there's 2 of them is that they are the things that allow Gozer to come through to this plane. And as it goes, if you have one and they don't have the other, good. But apparently Egon had a plan, and I'll talk about that here a little bit more. So as it rolls through, Phoebe discovers the trap after discovering the PKE meter. The fun part is we start getting the introduction of Egon very slowly, and then it starts picking up. So their first night staying there in the house, well, first night, they move in, the chess set gets pushed off the thing. So Phoebe fixes it all, sets it back on the table. The next morning she wakes up, one of the pieces is moved. So she's like, okay. So she counter moves. Comes back after school, after doing all the other stuff, after meeting Podcast. Such a stupid fucking name, but it's funny. He's a funny little kid. He actually is like the clever little backbone to everything that happens. I actually like that. Oh my god, there's a moment right at the end when he meets Ray. Because Podcast makes podcasts about paranormal shit and other things like that. And Ray asked him, it's like, that was a good move, kid. Whatever, how do you know all this? Is like, oh, well, I dabble in all this. I have a podcast. It's called this. And he's like, oh, you're this? And he goes, you're my subscriber? That was so funny. It was so bad, but so funny, I let it happen. Speaking of bad and funny, I know I'm off of the plot. Oh my god. So Phoebe is like Egon, has no sense of humor, very straightforward, super intelligent, doesn't know how to really make friends, doesn't know how to connect to people properly, so it's just super awkward. So, off screen, but they say this, basically, like, how are you going to make friends? You need to communicate with people, you need to open up to people. So she tries to tell jokes. Most of her jokes are science related, and they are dad jokes to the extreme. And I laughed so hard at some of these jokes. It was so bad. Like, even at the end, when she's trying to distract Gozer, she's throwing out as many bad jokes as possible, and Gozer's just like, "What the fuck are you even doing, tiny person? What are you even doing?" Though if I was Gozer, I would have been like, "Why the fuck did we build my temple in the middle of nowhere where no one will worship me?" That's what I would have been saying, as this god of destruction, or whatever Gozer technically is. Um, but those jokes and her super dry delivery of most of them until the end, when her personality really starts coming out, is so phenomenal. It's so bad, and it's just so funny. It's like, I bet I was one of the only people in the theater laughing. There was not that many people in my theater. But God, it was bad. It was so bad. I wish I had wrote them down. I'm hoping to go watch it again with Miss Shoky, so I'm gonna write those jokes down, because they're that funny. Um, and I wish, and some of them are physics jokes, some of them are ghost jokes, some of them are just bad, and it's just like all of them are terrible, terrible, terrible lines. It's so funny. Um, so either way, so the idea is they let out Zool or Vince, not sure which one, and now we kicked off the plot. So now we have one of the evil things that has now to uh, gone back to the mount. So here's the thing that I kind of neglected to realize in a movie. So at the beginning, when Egon dies, whichever one he has, the other has come to fetch it. Because Gozer, which is what he was hoping for. He was hoping Gozer would be coming to get them. So he was trying to do a thing. That's why he was luring them back to the house. That's what he was doing, using Ghost as a lure for Gozer. It failed because Gozer didn't come along, seemingly. Here's the problem I have plot-wise with this. We know that the Keymaster and the Gatekeeper have to turn the key in such a way. That means there had to have been two people. If it was happening proper, unless he was there in time to grab them before they took a corporeal form and possess someone, which we see that the ghosts can exist, or the terror dogs can exist without having a host. But apparently a host body matters only to a degree, because whenever they go to possess someone, they can still interact with the physical world. When Paul Rudd's character Gary gets I almost said infected, gets possessed, it's eating dog food in a Walmart, which is hilarious. Why the fuck is it in Walmart? I think it was there mostly to get Gary. So because Gary and the mom were already on a date, and that got interrupted by the kids getting arrested because... So... Good God. Okay, so I went around it in a big bubble, and that's my bad. So Phoebe finds the PKE meter. She finds the trap. Finn Wolfhard's character, I can't remember his name within the movie, her brother, he finds Ecto-1. They very slyly to show you that she's into tech, knows a lot about engineering, and he knows cars. They show their family car broke down on the side of the road. He's the one fixing it. Beautiful storytelling without having to tell you anything out loud. Not, hey, I'm into cars. Literally, you see him fixing the car. They don't even say anything. Move on. He discovers the Ecto-1. He discovers the other Cadillacs in the backyard that are there to help keep the Ecto-1 rolling because parts. He fixes up the Ecto-1 and he takes it for a drive. How this thing can drive so well after God knows how many years of being abandoned. Because even Egon's not using it. He's just got it there because of the equipment. In theory, he expected to have to use it. He just didn't. The fact that he invented an RC-controlled trap. The fact that he invented the gunner seat. Which actually may have been some improvements they did back in the day. We're not sure. But he stole it. It is what it is. It no longer had some of the bigger upgrades they did to the Ecto-1B, which is why I say the second movie is no longer canon. Because it didn't have those upgrades. Ecto-1A only with upgrades. They would not have gone backwards because those other upgrades they did in the second movie were important upgrades that would have been very useful in this movie. That's why it sucks that they did that. So, I believe that they effectively erased Ghostbusters 2. from canon with this movie, which is fine. Weird, but fine. So, he fixes up the Ecto-1, takes it for a joyride through the field and everything else like that, and then so happens that Phoebe and Podcast are doing shit over here, and then they kind of run into each other. The other thing is how she discovers the whole thing with the chess set. She already mentioned she doesn't believe in ghosts, but then she starts interacting with one and then doesn't think anything of it. So she starts playing chess, and then it gets really aggressive, which is weird. So the PKE meter starts going off. She now figures out that there's a ghost in the room with her. And then he starts leading her out of the house, cleverly using lights in the hallway, leading her. Also, she's using the PKE meter to follow when there's no other signals. And he leads her out to his shed, where the motherfucker has built a bunker underground. So probably like a tornado shelter or old bomb shelter. And he installed fire pole. Do you think this thing still works? Nobody says that, but it's implied. And it's in a separate building that's not the garage, or else they would have gone for that. So it probably makes sense. Middle of Oklahoma, there's literally nothing around. This tornado country, which is probably why some people completely ignore the crazy swirly shit happening in the sky. They're probably like, it's tornado time, everybody get in a shelter. Probably has happened, which is funny. So she goes into Egon's lab, starts flicking on lights and stuff like that. Everything's sort of depowered. She's looking around. She discovers the outfit. She discovers his fungus and mushrooms and stuff like that. And then this moment was really good, and I love that they did this. So at this point, you're assuming it's Egon, but you're not entirely certain. And then he moves this one light. It's like a work light that's on a thingy, so it can move around a bit. He turns it on and then points it at the proton pack. So at some point, he put the proton pack down there, but it had to have been at a different point. So this is one of those other plot points. It's a little wonky. So he only had the one main proton pack, and then the one in the Ecto-1 and the 4 he set up as a trap. So the only other concept is maybe he used one of those. But it shows clearly his proton pack is broken. The cyclotron and other things like that are fucked. So this is so brilliant. They used the bendy light for him to communicate with her. So he like shows her the proton pack. She's like, how did you make a cyclotron so small? He turns the light over to all his degrees on the wall. He's just, oh, okay. So you're really smart. Yeah. She doesn't know him. She doesn't know his name. She doesn't know who he is. She's only barely been instructed on who the Ghostbusters were. She puts 2 and 2 together that the guy that kind of looks like me, has the curly hair, the glasses, and is highly intelligent, must be him. And then all the stuff in the shop clearly states it's him. She repairs the proton pack. Like, he shows it to her. She looks at it. She goes, "What's wrong with it?" And, like, she literally just takes it apart and notices, oh, it's missing a couple parts. It's like, where are these? Shines the light over there. Or opens a drawer or something like that. And she starts putting the parts back together. She's like, I need some needle nose pliers. And he's like, whoop. He's like, it's so great. Like, not only does she now believe that ghosts are real, and now she knows that this is her grandpa, more or less. And she's literally taking instruction from this ghost on how to fix his equipment. So he's trying to put her back on the mission. He knows that his daughter is an absolute lost cause, but that this little girl, who is clearly like him, which, mind you, he's never met, he doesn't know probably doesn't know her name other than hearing about. As soon as she picked up the PKE meter, and he's the reason she found the trap. So that's how that worked out. I think he shoved the chair out of the way or something. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember exactly how he led her to the trap, but that's what happened. Maybe it was PKE meter, I don't know. But that's how she discovered the trap. But this bonding moment between granddaughter and grandfather over this technology and stuff like that. And then, she shows it to podcast. They go take it out to a field near the refinery where they would work on the metal. Like, they clearly show this town was built around industry that's gone. And now that they know that this was about Shandor, that makes more sense. So whatever was mined, they brought there. So they take the proton pack out to go test. He sets up a bunch of shit on a post or whatever, like you would do with a BB gun or whatever. And she tries to shoot this thing. Like, she's putting on this super heavy proton pack, which is heavy for adults, mind you. And she puts it on, and it's like the size of her. It's so funny. And like the fact that she was, and I expected them to do this. I expected them to do the thing from 2016. This is how much 2016 has ruined my brain. I expected her to just go and be fucked off backwards, from the blast of the neutrino wand. But no, she literally grins and bears it and just sit there and, just blast the hell out of, everything that was over there. Because this is powerful. I think he had actually increased the power of his particular proton packs, which would make sense that over the years, as technology advanced, he could make it better. I just love the idea. She's like, how did you build such a small cyclotron? And then he shows the thing. And he's like, okay. Just stupid smart. All right. And now she knows who the Ghostbusters are. She knows that this is Egon. She now knows the technology. So they happen to have the trap. Mind you, the Terror Dog is gone. But then they start hearing a ghost. This is the one we see in the trailers. It's named Muncher, which is so dumb. They just sort of give him that name out of the blue. And that's one of the things is like nobody came up with that. They just started calling it Muncher as though somebody said it a week ago. And that was one of the very quick things that happens. So they find Muncher in the thing. He's literally eating metal. Why he eats metal? Who the fuck knows? But he can. Why the metal doesn't just fall through him like what happens with Slimer, who eats food and it just falls right through him? Who knows? I thought that he was going to be a plot point other than the training ghost. I thought he was going to end up being like he eats certain metals and they need that metal to complete something, and that's what his point was. So what happens is they try to scare him off initially with, I think, was it a Aztec death whistle, which is so funny. And apparently maybe Adam Savage made some from the movie, potentially. And it doesn't work. It just pisses him off, and it's so funny. It's like, I know that's not going to work because it said it's supposed to ward off evil spirits. So podcast plays it as loud as he can. And instead of scaring him off, he just roars back at them and they're like, shit. So she starts shooting at it. And then they chase after it. It runs away. But the cool thing is, he's kind of floating, but I get the feeling like he's now heavy from eating. He's got 6 arms, and he's literally crawling away through the pipes of this thing. I'm like, that's cool, because he's a ghost. He could literally just go whoop through the wall and be gone, and nobody would fucking know. But maybe due to the type of ghost he is, he can't. I mean, he's already eating metal. He interacts with metal. He doesn't seem to pass through things in the same way. So it's very interesting. So I don't know if he's a class 5 free roaming vapor or free roaming vapor or not. So it's pretty interesting. Like, if they had, like, now it's a different story because Egon left all his shit behind. Technically, the Ghostbusters still have some of their stuff, even though they're all split up. Like, the knowledge should still be around for somebody to interact with. Oh, one thing that is interesting. So, Gary, after the whole incident with releasing the Terror Dog into the world, he takes the kids back home. Now he's exploring the house. He discovers this super old map that's written in Sumerian, but it's their town. So even 1,000 years ago, they knew that this place would be a temple for Gozer. Like, there's a few of them across the world. So whatever drew them here, whether it was the Gozer itself, which is possible. It's entirely possible that this was like one of the ancient realms that Gozer ruled, because Gozer did rule here at some point. Same thing with Vigo. Apparently Vigo was a tyrant and whatever. a human turned to a supernatural being, basically. Made themselves a god. Which, by the way, yes, they pay off the thing. They literally stop the movie to say, "Are you a god?" And then Ray does say, "Yes, we are a god." But it literally takes the others going, "Ray, are you gonna say it this time?" I was like, they did not just do that. That was kind of annoying and dumb, but it needed to be done. So, anyways, they chase after the ghost. He's getting away. They happen to run into the brother who's now joyriding with Ecto-1. They're like, "Hey, we need help." Like, okay, what's going on? What is that thing? Who's this kid? You have a friend? Which is really funny. So he's living his own life completely separate from mom and sister, where he's trying to get a car to hook up with the girl from work, which I still don't know her name. They say it, but I don't know what it is. It's just said, and I don't know. I think they only say her name once throughout the entire movie, and it's right at the end. So that's the love interest of Finn Wolfhard's character, therefore he needs to do the things. He already said that he can drive, so therefore he goes and fixes up the Ecto-1. She, Phoebe, no nonsense. He failed his driving test 3 times, he can't drive. And then later on spills the beans that he's only 15 when he lies and says he's 17 to get the job. So, this is where they get the big action scene where they're going after Muncher in the Ecto-1. This is how we get the remote control ghost trap. This is how we get the gunner seat, which is actually pretty interesting how that happened. So she happened to be sitting in the seat, and Podcast accidentally kicks the release, and then it flips out, and they're like, okay, well, now this is how we do it. So that leads to them going after, because she's trying to shoot out the window initially, which how they didn't discover at this point that there was a whole separate proton pack there. They just kind of flub that. They just sort of, like, they ignore the fact that it has one in the car, mounted in the gunner seat. You just assume that it's the same one that she's using. It's not, but they just make that assumption. Later, they clearly show it 2 separate proton packs, which is a plot point later, so it's fine. They chase Muncher through town. He disappears at one point, gets ahead of them. They have him lassoed, and then they're trying to catch him with a trap, and then a car coming the other way interferes. Then they lose him. Then they end up chasing him down as he's trying to get back to the mine. And that's how they figure out there's something going on, and how the brother was at the mine the night before with all the other kids from work, hanging out doing dumb shit, when kids have nothing better to do in town, hanging out over the cool mine. And then something crazy happens, and that's when one of the terror dogs shot out of there. We just ignored that part. But he said, I looked down in it, it looked like this face and this fire, and it said Gozer, and that's how we start making all these connections. So now we know who the Ghostbusters are, we now have the Ecto-1, we now have the equipment we need. Now we know that Gozer is the thing. We started to look into the Cult of Shandor, we're starting to look at this stuff. And to say that Egon became obsessed with this is an understatement. But the fact that nobody would listen to him was the part that got a little bit beyond disbelief. It's like, we're already past this point. However, if you exclude the second movies happening and how we have other evil interdimensional things that can now come in and try to take over the world, and that these massive underground tunnels of psychokinetic slime exist, as you ignore all of that stuff and we only go off of what happened in the first movie, he would sound like a crazy person if he got into research or into the Cult of Shandor and the Cult of Gozer, the Worshippers of Gozer, the Cult of Shandor. If he got into all of that stuff way deeper, but then the others were more focused on the business end. Like, we've got to stay alive. We got to keep doing. He's the only one continuing, which is actually what happened in Ghostbusters Extreme. He's the only one who stuck around to maintain everything. He's the only one who maintained that even though most ghosts were gone, this wasn't over yet. And then it's what happens. Nobody listened to him. They didn't participate. They didn't stick around. Some of them possibly died. But in this movie, everybody just left to go do their own things, went back to life. Even though they invested everything they had in being the Ghostbusters, if there's nothing left to bust, what do you do? Well, he was preparing for the next big thing that we would need to bust. The fact that we never got to the point of like Ghostbusters International, we never got to the point that other shit was going down across the world, was it, you know? So now we're bringing all the pieces together. We've got the kids here who need to do this thing. That's when they go to the mine. I forget. I think they take. I don't remember. No, they didn't take Paul Rudd. It was just the kids themselves. He's off getting infected by a terror dog. So that's when they discover the mine. They discover the temple. They discover Shandor himself in the mine, and that's when they discover Egon had set up this barrier to keep them down, which is awesome. It's just crazy that he came up with that. The fact that he built 4 more proton packs, because he only took his 1 proton pack, according to Ray. He said he took the 1 proton pack, he took all the traps. Which, if he was expecting to encounter a lot more ghosts, he would need more traps, especially with having no containment unit. So the only containment unit that we know of in existence is the one in the firehouse, because it's in the wall. You can't really take that with you. Also, that we don't really ever talk about the fact that containment unit is, in some aspects, its own mini universe. At least in the cartoons it was. So this is where things get wonky. They discover all this stuff. They discover Shandor. They now know that they now see the dates going around. It looks like one big long code, and then you realize that they're years. And they say, okay, this year, Krakatoa happened. This year, World War II. This year, the sinking of some other major event. 1984. What happened in New York? The next one is 2021, although they sort of kind of, because originally it was supposed to be last year. And 2012 was not on the list, but that was funny. Like, if it happened in 2012. So if Egon has been there waiting all this time for all of this uprising to happen, and he's been holding back the tide by himself, it's insane. The fact that he didn't reach out to anyone, nobody knew who he was, nobody knew what he did. They called him the dirt farmer. The whole town just thought he was a recluse. He didn't talk to anybody. He never bonded with anybody. He did go to the hardware store. He bought a whole bunch of weird crap. How he ever had money, nobody knows. He must have been doing odd jobs for people here and there to make money. Usually how crackpots in these movies work. The fact that he had built so much infrastructure to his farm related to ghostbusting, but how, when he had no money, reportedly never had any money. The land itself was the only thing he had of any worth. You know, even Janine didn't know what all was there. She was just sort of the person who ran the business, as it were. So he sort of drugged Janine along later on to kind of keep things flowing. But, it almost seems like, because she didn't live there, so how she was directly tied is sort of left out. She may have been still in New York, but still taking care of his finances, more or less, keeping the books, realizing that he had accumulated a fuck ton of debt to make this happen, and given that it makes sense, But even to her, so she didn't believe in what he was doing. That's the fucked up part, because when she talks to the daughter at the beginning of the movie, she doesn't believe in what he was doing either. It's like, so she's like, I don't know what he did here. He just, made all this shit, didn't know that he was still ghostbusting, or else she could have been very useful to the plot. She wasn't, so therefore she didn't know what was going on. So, and there was a point, there's a tiny weird plot point at the final end credit scene, which if you've seen it, you've seen it, where they sort of have another connection. And I don't know if it was a left out scene from the original movie where she and Egon are talking and she gives him this lucky coin, sort of, and then she has it at the end. Maybe that's the only reason she went to Oklahoma, to get that coin back after he died. I don't know. Maybe he gave it back after he died, so to speak. Because she was not there for the finale when Egon emerges again. So, all hell breaks loose. Terror Dog infects their mom. Zool clearly is the female because it keeps infecting females. Period. And then Vince Clortho gets into Paul Rudd. Makes sense. They have a romantic dealie happening. Might as well. Original movie, Rick Moranis, Sigourney Weaver. It makes sense that, you know, he had a thing for her. She didn't care, but that's how that happened. But in this case, it's two people who are interested in each other, sort of, and so they do the thing. So he ends up betraying them in a way. So seemingly, even though they can manifest to possess someone, they can't do anything on their own. So they know that this trap has been set for Egon repeatedly. They need to get past it. If they can't shut it down, it won't work. But I guess due to what happened, they now find a body they can infect. So takes over Paul Rudd's body. He goes to the mine and he destroys Egon's trap. You know, he destroys using one proton pack to destroy another, then all hell literally breaks loose at that point. All the ghosts shoot out of the ground. They start spreading all over town. Their mom has already been affected by Zool at this point, and then, or well, we don't know that, but you know, it has happened in a very similar manner. She sits in the chair, the arms take over, all that kind of shit. It happens. And all of this is basically like within eyesight of the house, which is pretty interesting. I mean, the fact that Egon would have the house within eyesight of Gozer's temple would make sense. So while the kids are trying to figure all this shit out over here, all this stuff is happening over here, they come home. Mom's affected. Mom's possessed. They try talking to her. She hulks out on them more or less, and then once things really start kicking off at the temple, she now takes off through the window, running that way on all fours. What's interesting, when she gets there, it's funny, Paul Rudd is like all tore up and like he must have really been attacked when he got possessed. So he's just chilling out on a rock like this. And then she walks up, and it's pretty cool. So, like, we always wondered where that dress came from that Dana changed it into in the first movie. Apparently, that's part of the effect. So, like, as she's walking up, she's in her normal mom clothes, and then she gets hit with this, like, magic that changes her outfit to this, what apparently must be a ceremonial dress for the humpening. So, they hook up. It's really stupid. Like, he says some dumb line about her looking pretty or something like that, and then she just sort of barks back at him like a dog, which is weird. Or she said something, I couldn't understand it. And then they do their thing, which all kicks off everything. So, like, within the mine now, what was a sculpture carved into the wall now breaks out, and it's actually the Temple of Gozer again, just like breaks through the wall this time. It's pretty crazy looking. And then the kids now, okay, we need help. We've now got, I'm sorry, the kids got arrested. I left that out. The kids get busted after blowing up the town. They confiscate all of their ghostbusting equipment and the Ecto-1. The kids get to go. Mom's pissed off. That's how we led to this. So, now that they know what's going on, and now they know, they investigate Egon's lab, they discover that he had set up a proper plan for this. They discover that the silos that he has set up are a giant conductor or a capacitor for energy, and he was trying to power the biggest trap in history. So they figure out all this. The kids all get together. They all throw on the Ghostbusters gear, and they head to the mountain. By this point, they've already summoned Gozer, which is a really cool sequence of how they form Gozer. They both end up taking on the Terror Dog forms, just like they did originally, in very similar, very, very similar animations. Pretty cool. And then Gozer just chilling there, and the kids roll up very quietly. They pull the Ecto-1 up. They're hiding. Phoebe's gone off to one side. They've got Podcast doing another thing. They've got the girlfriend that I don't know her name. It's either Lucky or Bunny. I'm not sure what There's a character named Bunny. I'm just not sure if that's who it is. So she takes proton pack, goes somewhere else, and then they're in a thing like, where the fuck's she going? And she's not with them at the mountain, so we don't know what happened there. It's weird. So they have a plan, and it's Egon's plan, but executed not alone. So this is where Phoebe walks out. Now they got somebody brand new, obviously, to be Gozer. Very interesting. They even changed up the eyes, so it's not the crazy like red, googly, sparkly eyes or whatever they did. The weird effect for that. Still the same flat top, very similar body dimensions, weird stuff going on, but purely black eyes and like very different face, but similar enough to this is Gozer. Gozer to Gozerian. They didn't really think that name through very well, did they? Either way. So she walks out in front of Gozer, and instead of immediately killing this little girl, which would have made more sense, she just starts going off on these dumb jokes. She's literally being a distraction against a supernatural, godlike creature. Because their plan is to use the remote-controlled trap to steal one of the terror dogs, because they know that Gozer cannot do what Gozer needs to do with half of its gateway gone. So there's a connection between the terror dogs and Gozer that they figured out, probably through literature or whatever. So they do it. Now at first they fuck up, so the terror dogs are just standing there with Gozer, just being on guard, like not doing anything, not making anything happen. The other ghosts are now off annoying the town, sort of. At least in one or two scenes they are. And so they pull the remote controlled trap underneath Zool, activate it, and it works. It actually sucks Zool in, but as you see, it sucks half of Gozer's existence into it as well. So it's not just that they fuck and then the gate opens and then Gozer walks out. They exist as part of Gozer. They are an anchor, like an anchor to Gozer in this world. They're part of its power. So by sealing away Zool, they now also free their mom. So now everybody hops in the Ecto-1 and they haul ass back to the farmhouse. And at this point, Vince is following them. Gozer's doing whatever, trying to follow them, I guess. And they're hauling ass back to the house, driving insane, trying to get back. Also, when they stole their stuff back, I mentioned that, sorry. So they had to steal their stuff back from Impound, which is pretty cool. So they just get the Ecto-1 off the rack and they drive it off. But how they get the proton pack and the trap, which are now locked up, and like internal lockup, it's pretty crazy. So kid, small enough arm, reaches inside, pops open the trap. Muncher's still in there. Muncher comes out, instantly pissed off, eats his way through the metal, which this is what I mean. He can't pass through things the same way Slimer could. So he can't get out of this cell, so he eats his way out, which is their way into their equipment. Genius. I love that they did that. Very scary, though, because like he's more interested in eating metal than he is about killing little kids, which is a great thing. So either way, that's how they got their shit back. Sorry, I told that out of order. They run back to the house. Now we are back to the beginning of the movie. This is exactly what Egon did at the beginning of the movie, except what I think he didn't expect to happen was that Gozer didn't follow him the first time. If Gozer managed to resurrect, this is the thing. I think what he meant to do to stop this permanently was to keep Zool and Vince Clortho trapped permanently. Was his goal. So what he tried to do initially was to set off this super trap. So what he has done, because everybody said, you're just farming the dirt, what could you possibly been doing? That's when they discover he has literally buried all of those traps he took. He probably made more. He buries them in the ground surrounding the house, connects them all to one power grid, and has them set for simultaneous detonation. So as they end up at the house, you see the storm that was above the mountain has followed them. So the psychokinetic storm that's full of ghosts and everything else like that. The fact that they didn't have more ghosts being sent to attack them I think they wanted to keep, like, they would have just been too much like the first or the 2016 movie where they had to fight through an army of ghosts to do it. I think they just wanted to avoid that. But they should have had more of the ghost attacking the town. There's just like literally one instance of it that I could see. That's where a miner literally shows up at the diner to get some coffee, which looks very much like the cab driver from the, was it second or first movie? No, first movie when they bust open that thing. So, um, it's a literal repeat of history. So, it's Phoebe holding the trap, standing there on the porch exactly as Egon did to try to get them. And their mom is now with them. So she goes, "Mom, hit the switch." And she's like, "What?" And then flip the switch up. You see the capacitors go off. So we're like, okay, now we're ready. We're going to make this happen. Of course, they don't know that it failed the last time. Didn't have enough power, apparently. Seemingly, that's what happened. Except what happens here is that Vince comes through to attack them. But Gozer does too. Like, much weaker than before, but still. But when it fails to happen, they use they break the trap. If I remember correctly, Gozer breaks the trap open, releasing Zool. Zool now takes over the girlfriend. So this is a very interesting thing. That's how I said Zool is a female entity, only takes female possessees. So they try to stop Zool with the one proton pack, and they're planning on using the secondary proton pack in the Ecto-1. So they have the porch, that's where the girlfriend stayed behind to do this. So they're going to use the 2 proton packs to capture both of them and try to activate the trap net. And it doesn't work. She ends up getting lassoed by Zool, or by Gozer, via the proton stream, which is insane. So instead of it being used to trap the spirit ends up using that as an actual physical lasso to the wielder and pulls her out, breaking the stream. She breaks the trap open, releases Zool. Zool takes over her. Now we have 2 Terror Dogs and a now full-powered Gozer. In their secondary proton pack, which they were trying to use, is now being affected by the stupid little marshmallow men who are now taking over and trashing the Ecto-1. And that's where Finn Wolfhard was trying to use the thing. You got Podcast trying to run stuff in the background, and everything has failed. You know, it has to happen. The heroes can't win just yet. And right then, when everything is about to hit the fan, the old Ghostbusters showed up. So while they were in jail, Phoebe made her one phone call. Wasn't to Mom. How they knew that the kids got busted, I'm not entirely certain. I don't remember. So she calls Ray. This is how I said Ray kept the phone number from the original firehouse, and he kept it to a red phone, so just in case somebody needed to call the Ghostbusters. Apparently he kept paying for that phone number to be active for 30 years. So is this Ray Stantz, the Ghostbuster? And he goes, "All right, I'm done." And he goes to hang up. And she's like, wait. And so she goes on this whole big spiel, talking about how Egon, you know, she asks about Egon, and he said Egon's an asshole, you know, he's a piece of shit. You know, he didn't say that, but, you know, that's how we literally get the story of what happened to the Ghostbusters. That's how, you know, Egon went nuts and all that. You know, I mentioned all that earlier, but this is how we get that exposition through Ray. And you could tell Ray is still torn up about it. Like, it was a betrayal. But they didn't see how they were betraying him by doing this. And that's one thing that's super important about this part of the story, is like the original Ghostbusters went about their lives thinking they were done being Ghostbusters. Egon realized their job was not done. And he's the only one who realized their job wasn't done, and apparently couldn't get any help from anybody after that. Like, not even the rookie, that apparently doesn't exist in this universe, which sucks. So, you know, when he realized that only he was going to do this job, he went and did it. Not knowing that he would eventually have a granddaughter who would complete this for him. So, when she makes that call, her call gets interrupted. She said, Egon Spengler was my grandfather. And then he realizes, wait a minute. Okay. And so this is the plot point that doesn't make sense, is how the fuck they knew where to go. Like the only way that I can think that they knew where to go, because mind you, that phone call happened pretty much the same day or the right before. So the only way they could have possibly known, because she doesn't say, I'm in Oklahoma, I'm at his house, this is happening. She doesn't really manage to tell him anything of import. He gives her exposition. She doesn't manage to say Gozer is coming back. She doesn't manage to say any of that in this moment. And they know what's going on at this point, for the most point. So Ray, realizing, wait a minute, something's going on. If she called me, we know that Egon died. Or now we know that Egon died. Yeah, because I think she even says 2 weeks ago. So that all happened very quickly. So he's talking shit about Egon until he finds out he died, because he said he can go to hell, and she said he died, and it's like, oh shit, he might have gone to hell. So he's like, oh wait, never mind, I'll tell this whole story. So she gets the whole story from them. He finds this out. She gets cut off after saying that she's his granddaughter. And so that triggers Ray to go, wait, something's going on. So they had to have called Janine. Janine's the only one who knew where the house was or any of that. She's the only person who could have possibly had the connection to give them that info. Aside from maybe Google. But, you know, the odds are they called Janine, because it's at the end, at the very, 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 very end, you find out that, you know, Janine is still connected to them to a degree. So the old Ghostbusters show up. And I don't know if it was Ray or Venkman who said this. And so they interrupt. Gozer is about to blast everybody to death. And they show up, and they're in their uniforms. They're old as fuck. Except for Ernie Hudson, who looks fantastic, by the way. Ernie Hudson is the only one who still looks good. They did what they could for, what's his face? For Dan Aykroyd. But Bill Murray just looks like hot garbage. And he is hot garbage, let's just be honest. He ruined the Ghostbusters franchise. The fact that he still have to be tied to it is so annoying, because it would have been fine if he did not come back. So they come in next to the Ecto-1, and, you know, the three of them, they have their proton packs. So this, I said, they kept their proton packs. Egon only took his. So the ones he has after that, he created there. So when the hardware store guy was talking about buying all kinds of weird crap, that's what he meant. So he built more proton packs from what he could get from the hardware store, basically, which is insane. So they help. They immediately start blasting Gozer. They immediately cross the streams, because they know this is the only way to do this, except they're not at the gate. They didn't shoot Gozer with it. They shot the gate and reversed the flow, and it sucked everything back in. That's how that worked, in case you're wondering. That's what Egon was doing. But they only have 3 working proton packs. The one in the car is shut down, and the other one is laying in the dirt. So now Gozer grabs their stream and flings them back, and then goes to kill them. And you're like, oh, you think that she remembers us? You know, it's like, oh, she remembers us. And that's when they do the whole "Are you a god?" thing and all that stuff, which is fine. They relive that moment, and everybody gives Ray a bunch of bullshit about that. And even Winston's like, oh, we're not fucking this up this time. No more talking. Just blast the bitch. And then they have to give Phoebe, you know, her moment to shine, even more than she's shown through this whole damn movie. So she picks up the proton pack that's on the ground and then hits Gozer with it. And they're like, what? Okay. So now we now have 4 working proton packs. Yay. So at this point, she's the only thing standing against Gozer. Only thing at all. And in return, Gozer shoots lightning back at her. So now we have a beam struggle, which is kind of cool. And it's pushing her back, like, because these are physical things. You know, the proton stream is a fairly physical thing, as we've seen, that they can be pulled around by it. They can grab a hold of it. You know, spirits at least can do this. she starts getting pushed back, and the lightning is getting to her, and she can't hold her own. Her feet are digging into the dirt, everything. Are like, she can't do this. And everybody's like trying to cheer her on. It's like, well, she can only do so much. She's a 10-year-old girl. And then the ghost hand. So once again, leading into some Star Wars here. Jedi Force Ghost Egon shows up and literally gives her a hand, helps stabilize her, helps hold her. He's in his uniform that's been updated. His hair is way crazy. They recreate Harold Ramis, at least as he really looked like before he died. Not quite as fat, probably, but if you've seen some of the last movies he was in before he passed, he was in a few. You know, they've really recreated him to give him more of a beard. But it's really good. Like, it's really, really well done. You know, he looks like a Force ghost, realistically. You know, he's see-through, he's blue. And then everybody sees him. And then, whether it happened right here or not, but Ray says, I knew you'd show up. Might have been Venkman, but fuck Venkman. I'm always gonna, well, don't fuck Venkman. Fuck Bill Murray. But I do think it was Ray who said it. And so now we have the 4 original Ghostbusters, and we have our 4 new Ghostbusters kind of in the same scene together. And so they get back on their feet, and they're trying to stop her. So they don't have a working trap. They don't have anything working. So they manage to capture her and the terror dogs, and they're like, okay, what do we do? You know, it's like, we got to hit the freaking trap. Mind you, the storm is still going on above them. And at this point, Podcast accidentally discovered that now the PKE meter has gone into emergency mode, which is the taser that he had early on. So he now has a ghost taser, and he starts zapping all the fucking marshmallow men that are everywhere to get them off the electronics so that he can get the thing to work. As soon as he clears that off, the proton pack in the Ecto-1 is now functioning again. And they're like, okay, what do I do? Like, he goes to shoot and help, and he's like, wait a minute. And this is a thought I had in the thing. I was like, they need more power. It just doesn't have enough power to turn all the traps on. Because they're not progressively going. It's not like one to the next to the next. They're all together. So they had to activate all of the traps, which was established early in the movie. But then trying to open the trap in the first place, it didn't have enough power to open. So they had to use a battery off a freaking school bus to get it to work. Now, mind you, he wasn't there for that, but he was explained what a capacitor does. So he fires the proton wand at the capacitor instead. Now, mind you, everything else is already set up, so he fires it out there, and now it's powered the capacitor. Everything lights up. Like, so all the traps in the ground all suddenly light up. Like, the lights themselves are, we got power. And so she yells at Mom to hit the button. And so her mom steps on the switch again, and everything kicks off. The one thing that didn't make sense is when, amidst all of this, Egon is now over by the other Ghostbusters, who were completely on the opposite side of the battlefield at this point. So all of these traps go off at once. This blinding light coming from the ground, completely surrounding the house, and like the storm in the sky, all the ghosts start getting sucked in. We see Gozer gets sucked. Oh, not Gozer. We see Zool gets sucked in. We see Vince Clorto gets sucked in. And then we see Gozer start getting split up, because as Gozer is not a single entity unto itself, it is made up of these other ghosts. Not to mention, it needed the power of all of these other spirits to raise itself. It now all gets trapped amongst all of these traps that are in the ground. You know, God knows how many ghosts came out of the sky, but they weren't doing anything at all. And then it's all the traps shut, and it's all over. Running into the one other plot hole I have in this movie, and that is, why did Egon's ghost not get pulled into the trap? because they're everywhere. Like they're like even the Ghostbusters themselves are technically standing amongst the traps that are going off, and they're row after row after row overlapping so that there's no escape. But he wasn't a malicious ghost. We never see them interact with a normal everyday spirit. He's only sticking around to help, so maybe that's part of it. So then we get the sappy goodbyes with everybody. Literally, Egon. The Ghostbusters all apologize to Egon for not believing in him. It's really teared up, and he doesn't say anything. So they don't have Harold Ramis's voice in this at all. He doesn't speak. We know that spirits can speak. He just doesn't. He kind of says his goodbyes to them. Kind of gives an apologetic look to them as well. And then he goes and he, kind of hugs Phoebe. What's his face? Finn Wolfhard comes over, and he kind of puts his hand on his shoulder, because you never see him influencing to go fix the Ecto-1, which would have been cool if there would have been drops in there. He just happened to do that on his own. It's funny. So Phoebe follows a PKE meter. He actually follows his cell phone looking for a signal. It's kind of funny. And then he ends up finding the Ecto-1 in the garage. Also, not knowing about he kind of alludes to kind of knowing about the Ghostbusters, but isn't excited when he finds the Ecto-1. It's sort of, that's one other small plot point that kind of gets dropped. He seems to know about the Ghostbusters, but has no clue that his grandfather was Egon Spengler, all that kind of stuff. So, as it goes, the end of it is he hugs his daughter. So she's hated him through this whole thing. Everybody has hated him through this whole thing. But now that everyone knows what he was doing, it's all kind of forgiven. But it was also a moment she discovered his lab as well. I left this out earlier. So she finds PKE meter. She goes out to the lab, and he starts showing her around. And she also doesn't think it's weird that the light is sort of following, and he's like, okay. And then they do the do it for her moment. He turns on a light, and she thinks that she was worthless to him, that he didn't give a fuck about his family, didn't give a fuck about his kid. And then he takes her over to the wall where he's got her entire life in pictures on the wall. Once again, I think, not covered how he followed his daughter's entire life after he left. It had to have been Janine. Because if there's anybody who's going back and forth from New York, where they live, to Oklahoma, it's got to be Janine. And how he has specific dates, presumably his wife, whoever that is, not Janine, because she's not Mom. We don't talk about Mom, period, in this entire movie, just Dad. And she's not abandoned by the whole family, just them. But the Ghostbusters also don't know her, which I find really strange in the first place. Don't know who she is. Or maybe they did and they just sort of let that go, because they said it went on for a couple more years until Ghost dried up, and then all this shit went down. He left everybody behind, including his own family that apparently nobody seemed to know about. But I think that was where Ray understood. It's like, wait a minute, Egon had a family? Like, when did Egon have a family? And that's why he said, wait a minute. Okay, so something's up if his granddaughter is calling us about him and what happened. That's how. But it had to have been Janine. Janine had to have been the thing that was going through the background, keeping tabs on his family and telling him what was up. So he cared and kept up with his family, even though he was very focused on the mission to an absurd degree. And then as they're hugging, he just dissipates into energy, and then it floats up. So one thing we've never covered, so this is Afterlife. Not only talking about the under dimension where all the evil spirits go, where Gozer rules, at least in that part of the underworld and stuff like that. We never discuss what happens to non-negative spirits. We never discuss what happens to good people whose spirits are here and what happens to them. This is the only instance where we've seen a positive spirit, such as Egon, who moves on. We've only seen what happens when they don't, when they're full of negative energy, when they're haunting, when they're killing, when they're doing all this thing. It's the only time we see a good ghost pass on. And he actually gets to go. And then it passes up into the sky, and that's technically at the end of the movie. And it says For Harold. So we get to see Egon's character literally pass on, presumably to heaven. And it says For Harold. Now, the next thing we get, prior to that, we actually saw, after everybody's talking, this is where Ray talks to podcast. Winston talks to the Ecto-1, and he's like, oh girl, what happened to you? He's like, I'll take you home. And I was like, wait, you're gonna take the fucking car? I was like, that's horse shit. You're just gonna come here and take the shit and leave? That's fucked up. So they do show, as they're, when they run through the initial credits, they show New York City coming across, I think, the Brooklyn Bridge. And you're hearing the Ghostbusters theme start to kick off, and then you see police cars, and they're leading the Ecto-1 on the bridge. Ugh. So, the end of this movie is really moving. So, the whole tribute to Egon and Harold, him fixing his family, more or less, fixing his friends, his other family, all of that makes sense. And then to see the Ghostbusters return to New York City triumphant. Nobody's gonna know unless they tell. Nobody filmed this. It wasn't on the news. It happened in fucking middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. But it's a big enough deal that the Ecto-1 comes back to New York. And so then it rolls to another credit scene, which is annoyingly Venkman doing his stupid card test like he did in the first opening of the first movie. But what's amazing is that they got, and I knew what was happening immediately, that it's Sigourney Weaver. So I think it alludes to Peter and Dana stayed together instead of breaking up, and the kid doesn't exist. Like I said, Ghostbusters 2 does not exist anymore. They eliminated it from the timeline. Although Sigourney Weaver looks amazing, and Bill Murray looks like a pile of hot garbage. But the scene is funny, where he's literally, telling her exactly what's on the cards, and it's like, that's awesome, how are you doing this? She's making fun of him, too. And she goes, you marked the cards, didn't you? And she's doing the shock test thing, so if he gets it wrong, shocked, he gets shocked, so she keeps shocking him. Thank you for at least punishing Bill Murray. And then, so in watching this movie, I've been trained well by Marvel to stick around to the end. Everybody else left the theater. Mind you, it wasn't a packed theater. It was maybe 20 of us max, if that. Everybody else left, except for one other guy who came back to get his jacket and saw me sitting there, so figured he'd stick around. Stick around literally to the very fucking end, after the credits. And it starts a scene from the original movie. And it's the one I talked about earlier, the gold coin. And I'm like, wait, this is from the first movie, but I don't remember ever seeing this. Maybe I have to go back and rewatch it. So it's as Egon is leaving to, I guess they were going to go fight Gozer. They were going to the building. And Janine is saying this is like, unless this is meant to be footage like when he initially left and Janine knew about it, but it's very unclear. We'll have to go back and look. So it's supposed to be, the coin is meant to be for luck and whatever. And then it flips to modern day and it's Janine holding the coin. And she's talking about, it's like, look, everybody else did this, but, you've made something of yourself. And she's talking to Winston, and we already mentioned he's a multi-billionaire at this point. He started this massive company, and he's a millionaire. And he's like, yeah, started off out on my own. I had this new, started out with just me and one other guy. And I was hoping it was going to be Rick Moranis. I was hoping that the guy he started the new business with was going to be Lewis, and it wasn't, unfortunately. Because that would make sense if it was Lewis and Janine stayed together, even though technically that hookup happened in the second movie, not the first one, but it would have made more sense. And she's talking about, it's like, yeah, you got all this money, what are we gonna do? And then it shows the firehouse, and it's run down, and you only see the light coming through the windows and just shitty. And then the door opens and it's Winston, and he walks in and he's like, I've done all this stuff, I've got this giant business and I'm this millionaire and all this stuff like this. I might be those things, but I will always be a Ghostbuster. And so they had discovered early in the movie that after Egon left, they couldn't afford anything anymore because he took most of the equipment. And so they sold the firehouse, and they said it was turned into a Starbucks, which was bullshit at this point because it's empty. There's no Starbucks there. There might be one next door. But as you know, in reality, that actual fire station is still active, or if nothing else. And they still have the Ghostbusters sign out front. I don't remember what the name of the station is anymore. But either way, the implication is that Winston, now having all this money, is going to resurrect the Ghostbusters proper. So initially it's him walking in through the walk door into the thing and looking around, and then he opens the doors and the Ecto 1 pulls up. So yeah, it's just having to wait so many years for a proper sequel. And with all the bullshit that got in the way, especially with Bill Murray, and then a lot of the other stuff that sort of got in the way financially, and with whoever owns whatever. The 2016 reboot that was fucked. It was just so fucked up. And I like the idea that happened in a separate universe. That's why the Ghostbusters exist in that universe, or the people. Bill Murray's character, even though he played somebody else, Ray. Had they actually had them be their same characters, but in that universe, would have been funny. And they never started the Ghostbusters, but they still have all their knowledge and all that shit from like Ray knowing about the occult, and then Egon doing whatever, and then Peter being an asshole. If they'd kept that idea within the 2016 universe, that they were never the Ghostbusters, but they were still the same people, would make sense to this. So we now have a new generation of Ghostbusters. We've got all the equipment and all of the knowledge Egon gained for all those years. We now have the original firehouse. We have the Ecto 1 back. We've got funding. Although it seemed a little fucked what he said. It's like, I'm going to take you back home. It's like, wait a minute. Whoa. Hold on. It's like, well, wait a minute. But, like, the fact that, Ivan Reitman wrote the original with Dan Aykroyd and the other guys, and his son wrote this one and directed this one, like I said, it was a love letter to the original. It covered a lot of the similar story beats because it's a continuation of the same plot. Much like Star Wars Episode 7, it looks like A New Hope because it's carrying on the same plot. It's carrying on the same characters, so it is what it is. And I mean, like, as a resolution, and now knowing what has happened over all that time, I think it's good. I don't want them to episode 9 this shit though. I don't want that. As like, I would love to have a continuation, but they have to have a story that makes sense. You know? It's like, don't just keep retreading the same bullshit and get Bill Murray the fuck out of it. I don't know what it's going to take. Get rid of Bill Murray. He's great outside of this franchise, but he is the reason it is in the gutter and why it got fucked for so long, and it took us 30 years to even get a goddamn sequel that mattered. And the fact they killed him in the other one, it's become a joke of Bill Murray being the reason why Ghostbusters is in the shitter as it is. Don't do what other franchises have done in the resurrection of the thing. Like, don't call the next one Ghostbusters Resurrection. That'd be stupid. Although, not a bad title. Actually, I bet before they called this one Afterlife, it was probably called Resurrection. Because ghosts are coming back and all that. It would have been a fitting title. Afterlife was a better title given the passing of Egon and Harold. Let the next generation grow up. I mean, obviously, we don't want actual little kids out there running around being Ghostbusters, but having new people take over and train a new generation of actual Ghostbusters, give us better technology. And the end, this is the thing, the very, very fucking end of it is the containment unit with the light blinking. And like, alluding to maybe something that's in the containment unit is going to get out again, which does seem to happen a lot. Or if this is possible, they transfer all of those traps back to New York and they're going to offload all that shit into the containment unit, because they can literally keep Gozer from ever resurrecting. That would be crazy, because they never caught any big ghosts that we ever saw. We only see them catch the small annoying ghosts. I mean, they're doing harm, but that's what they did. They caught regular sized ghosts. Everything they fight, they destroy or push back into their dimension. Vigo was technically destroyed, but Gozer was sent back. They reversed the polarity of the thing, and it's kind of sucked back in all the spirits and stuff, which ended up dooming them in the first place. Why ghosts ceased to exist, why the activity increased before. But like, having that well into the underworld open, you know, I mean, if they build on this story to the fact that there has been shit going on around the world that was all tied to a very similar thing, but nobody's been dealing with it, they could build a whole universe around this, but not have to have it be the old guys die and the new kids just do exactly what they did. You know, that's not what this movie did. This movie was like saying goodbye to what was, but leaving it behind for the next generation to try to pick up. And I mean, even if they pick it up in a few years, and yeah, Phoebe's a teenager and she's actually out there, and then, you know, her brother is ahead whether he wants to or not. He can be the driver for all that matters, you know. And the mom is helping run things with Janine and stuff like that. I mean, it can be a generational story, and it should have always been, but we didn't know a generation got skipped. We didn't know why all this shit went down, and to make Egon the bad guy throughout most of the movie, and then you find out the truth as to why he became a dickhead, why he abandoned everyone, because the mission mattered more, which is fucked, but makes sense that it would drive him mad. And nobody would listen, you know. Everybody else became the assholes because they realized, shit, he was right. It's like, we already had all this crazy shit happen to us in the first place, and then, well, it dried up. The work dried up. Everything else went to shit, you know. But he's still insisting that it's not over when for everyone else it's over. But the fact that they wouldn't believe him leads credence to the idea that the second movie never happened. But that's what happened in the second movie. There were no more ghosts, so they're doing bullshit jobs. So if you take only the events of the first movie and the beginning events of the second movie, where they've become irrelevant, but they never got more funding, they never got bigger, ghosts didn't start blowing back up, the events with Vigo never happened, it makes sense. They fell into relative obscurity after becoming heroes of the city to one gigantic event that was crazy. For 2 years later, for the same another massive event to happen, and then faded to obscurity again. No, I think it was just the one major event in '84, because they don't talk about the next one, because that would go against what the Cult of Gozer, the Cult of Shandor was doing. So yeah, that's just the way I look at it. It's just the second movie doesn't exist. Dana's kid isn't a thing. She and Peter stayed together, even though he's still a dickhead. Ray went out to do his own thing. Winston went back to doing something else, became a giant businessman. I love that thing though. Eventually, Ray's books will probably turn around. I was like, we'll probably turn profit one of these days. They do. It's just fucking dumb. But the idea that Winston would be the one to resurrect the Ghostbusters as a whole is kind of cool. So the guy who didn't really believe in it, the guy who just came in because it was just a job, he even mentions that. It's like, when I got hired on, it was just a job, and then it became more, and then once it was gone, I had to do this, and it just started out with me and this other guy, which I still want to believe was Lewis. Which, if Lewis is dead in this universe, but he and Janine hooked up, would be interesting. But it's almost like I can't tell if she's just visiting him or she's visiting him to see if he'll resurrect the Ghostbusters. I can't tell. But if the idea is that they come back later, they're now prepared for events. Ghosts are happening, but other things. But to leave off on the containment unit blinking was interesting, because I thought it was green light means it's good to go, and red means there's something in the trap. But when it comes to the containment unit, I don't remember how that worked and why the light would be blinking red. Because in the second movie, they both did a whole lot of ghosts and then locked them up, and then Vigo came about, and then they fought Vigo. But that didn't happen, so it is what it is. But that's going to be it for this. This is a long-ass review. I got to go get some lunch now. But I'll see you guys next time.